Howdy folks, Treadhead. So before I get into the video here, just a couple things I want to mention. The first being, today is Friday, October 14th, when I'm making this video. And the October 14th part will become apparent. Its importance will become apparent in the video. But that means tomorrow is Saturday, October 15th, and tomorrow I will be at the Ontario Regiment Museum in Oshawa for their last tank Saturday of the year. And this one is Armageddon Cold War tanks. So there should be lots of heavy armor and big diesels, which is always good. So stay tuned for that. I will be releasing some videos next week from there. And the other thing is kind of how I got to this video I'm making today. So it's about this ship, the Caribou here, and the two nurses. I gotta confess, I have a bit of a soft spot in my heart for nurses. My mom was a nurse. Her sister, my aunt, was a nurse. My wife's a nurse. Her sister's a nurse. And I have some second cousins who are, you guessed it, nurses. And in addition, I work in a veterans care hospital. So I work with lots of nurses, beautiful people. So let's pay some tribute to some nurses. So anyway, the veterans care program I work at releases a calendar every year. And when it clicked over to October, I was looking through it, and there's a notation for the 14th. That talks about this nurse Agnes Wilkie, and I didn't know who she was, so I thought I'd look into the story. Turns out it's a pretty amazing story, so here we go. 80 years ago today, on October 14th, 1942, the Newfoundland Railway's ferry SS Caribou, accompanied by the Bangor-class minesweeper HMCS Grand-Mère, set sail from North Sydney, Nova Scotia, bound for Port aux Basques, Newfoundland. So yeah, this is a ferry service between Canada and Newfoundland, which wasn't officially a part of Canada until 1949, but anyway. On board, the Caribou were 191 passengers, 46 crew, and a whole bunch of assorted cargo, railway cars, livestock, that kind of thing. So two of the passengers aboard were our nurses. Women's Royal Canadian Naval Services nursing sisters Agnes Wilkie and Margaret Brooke. Agnes Wilkie was born September 5th, 1904 in Oak Bluff, Manitoba, and she graduated from the Winnipeg Hospital's Misericordia Nursing School in 1927. Agnes volunteered for the Royal Canadian Navy in January of 1942. And Agnes is the one on the right, and Margaret Brooke on the left there in the picture was born April 10th, 1915 in Andaf, Saskatchewan, and she attended the University of Saskatchewan in 1933, obtaining a bachelor's degree in household science. She then moves to Ottawa to complete an internship to become a certified dietitian. Margaret also volunteered for naval service, joining the Royal Canadian Navy in March of 1942. The Navy, of course, had no specific designation for a dietitian, so she was put with the nursing sisters, and that gave her the rank of sub-lieutenant. So during the Second World War, 4,480 women served as nurses for the Canadian military, 3,656 in the Canadian Women's Army Corps, 481 in the Canadian Women's Auxiliary Air Force, and 343 in the Women's Royal Canadian Naval Service. And that's the service that Agnes and Margaret both were in. So, on the 14th, shortly after 3 a.m., the Caribou was hit by a torpedo from the German submarine U-69. torpedo hit caused the ship's boiler to explode, and the Caribou went down in approximately 5 minutes. Agnes and Margaret were roommates on this voyage, and they were in their cabin when the torpedo struck. They were able to get their life jackets on and exit the cabin, but they were immediately found themselves in the cold, cold waters of the North Atlantic. And I can personally attest to this one. I have swam in the North Atlantic, and it was in July, and it was cold. I was in Nova Scotia. Anyway, the two nurses clung to debris until they were pulled aboard a capsized lifeboat with several passengers and some military personnel. Soon, both ladies began to suffer the effects of hypothermia, and when Agnes passed out, Margaret held on to her friend with one hand and the lifeboat with the other hand for almost 2 hours in very rough seas. Unfortunately, as dawn broke, a large wave caused Margaret to lose her grip, and Agnes was swept away into the ocean and lost. 137 lives were lost that morning, and Agnes Wilkie became the only Canadian nurse to die as a direct result of enemy action during the Second World War. If you compare it to the First World War, 53 nurses were killed in action. Margaret Brooke survived the sinking of the Caribou and was she was decorated for her actions that night, or early morning, and she was invested as a member of the Order of the British Empire, MBE. Agnes is buried with full naval honors in Mount Pleasant Cemetery in St. John's, Newfoundland, and there's also a monument in her honor in the cemetery in Carman, Manitoba, where she was from. Margaret continued to serve in the Royal Canadian Navy until 1962, when she retired with the rank of Lieutenant Commander. She then returned to her alma mater, the University of Saskatchewan, and obtained a PhD in paleontology. Pretty smart lady, I think. So then, in 2015, on her 100th birthday, Margaret received a telephone call from the Canadian Minister of Defence. This was to tell her that Canada was going to build 6 new Arctic offshore patrol vessels, and the second ship of the line was to be named in her honor. And there she is. This actually isn't the Margaret Brooke. This is the first ship of the line. But the Margaret Brooke would be identical to this one here. Let's see. Margaret passed away on January 9th, 2016, but on November 10th, 2019, HMCS Margaret Brooke was launched, and after completing sea trials in May of 2021 and an official naming ceremony on May 29th, 2022, HMCS Margaret Brooke became an official ship of the Royal Canadian Navy. So 2 pretty amazing women, and anyway, they're nurses, and they were involved in this this very interesting story from the Second World War. Anyway, thank you for coming out. So, like I said, look forward to some videos coming up very shortly from Tank Saturday in Oshawa at the Tank Museum. All right, thanks for coming out. Talk to you later. Treadhead says goodbye.